Hello. I was a Jewish believer in Jesus for 42 years. I am now no longer. So I'm age 60. I came to faith at the age of 18. No longer believe in Jesus. So in this video, I want to talk about mental illness and faith, and my observation as a Jewish believer in Jesus for decades. I did train initially as a psychiatric nurse many moons ago. What I observed, and people won't like this, but it's true. One of the things I noticed from Jewish believers was, and there weren't many, remember, because this is before this is before Messianic Judaism. We are talking before Messianic Judaism. Before Messianic Judaism, Jews who believed in Jesus were called Hebrew Christians. Christ means as Messiah, anointed one, so it's Jewish believers, followers of the anointed one. We were either called Jewish believers, Hebrew Christians. Then all that changed with the growth and of Jews for Jesus and so on. I noticed, one of the things I noticed was, although there weren't a lot of Jewish believers in Jesus, there were certain things I did notice, even at the time, was the fact that the prevalence of believers who did believe in Jesus but had mental health problems. I think of one boy I know, and it was quite serious. He was admitted and things, so he's obviously very unwell to be admitted into a psychiatric hospital. I think, if I remember rightly, his faith was based on a spiritual experience, which I've talked about in other videos. When I would go to meetings and different things, it struck me that it seemed to be the Jewish people, individuals, were vulnerable in some way. Do Christians prey on the vulnerable? Yes, but they wouldn't see it that way. They wouldn't see it that way. They wouldn't see it that way. Remember, they're prepared to tell anybody and everybody Jewish about Jesus being the Messiah. Obviously, they're not going to get anywhere with the chief rabbi, so they're not going to stalk him or bother with him. They tend to home in on the vulnerable people, and and the rabbis have complained about this over the decades, and they are right. They are right. They are right. I'm speaking from decades of experience. They tend to be the people, lonely people living on their own, perhaps very poor, suffering from depression. That's quite common. I've met a number of believers with different various degrees of mental health, what's called issues nowadays. And I remember thinking, even at the time, it's funny, it's how most of the believers I seem to be coming in contact with seem to be vulnerable in some way, and they're disconnected from the Jewish community. There's no doubt about that. And I also noticed amongst Jewish believers is the people that are very independent, like they're not interested in their own religion, and like the rabbis, I can't be bothered with listening to rabbis, and there often is manifest a contempt for their own religion, even though they don't actually know the religion that well. But they seem to have, I'm sorry to say, a contempt for their own religion for one reason or another. They're perhaps disillusioned with their own religion. But it was noticeable that it seemed to be numbers of believers I met suffering from depression. Some of it you might say might have come from the trauma of believing, but I got the impression it was there anyway, Um, they prey on little old ladies who they befriend, because it's all about befriending. I could think of a Jewish believer who he he suffered from depression. He felt inadequate. He had very confidence issues. He was very poor. He was unemployed. He lived alone in his bedsit. He was probably getting on in years. He was getting on for 40. You know, the people that, to use a well-used expression, marginalised. So you've got people not involved in the Jewish community, perhaps by their own choice. They're not involved, and they're alone. And the Christian befriends them. I can remember this Jewish man, very, very negative, you know, which is how people get when they get very, very depressed about everything and anything. And he'd obviously, a non-Jewish man, Christian, had befriended him, and he was really, with the best will in the world, trying to be a good friend to him. But it was quite clear he was the one that was encouraging to go to church, encouraging everything to do to reinforce this Christian faith, encouraging him to believe in Jesus, to keep believing in Jesus. So you've got this, how he came to believe in Jesus, I don't know, as the Messiah. But he did seem to be easily influenced, and very, very easily influenced. And this man had taken control, although he was well-meaning, you know, in his own way, you know. He was trying to control and manage him, and he couldn't have escaped from this belief, even if he'd wanted to, because this man now had a hold in his life. And he didn't have the strength of character to say, look, will you go away? I don't want anything to do with this Jesus business anymore. He wasn't strong enough for that. He wasn't strong enough. His mental state wasn't strong enough. He wouldn't have been able to cope with it. And I could see a lot of that over the years. And I remember thinking, it always seems to be people that are believing in Jesus who are either have a mental health issue, they are marginalised, isolated people, they're not connected to the Jewish community, they've perhaps never been connected to the Jewish community, and just easily led, easily influenced, easy to get these people to attend a church, the kinds of people where there'll be no resistance. And the kind of people, perhaps it sounds very corny, but you know, if you're lonely and you're not well with mental health issues and somebody's befriending you and taking an interest in you, and oh, why not come to church? It might be quite nice. So they'd go along, and they'd be just literally led astray. And they were the kinds of people that could be led astray. And I remember thinking that and observing that. That's what struck me as a Jewish believer in Jesus. I have to say, it did strike me very strongly. And I'm thinking to myself, I remember at the time, why aren't there more Jewish believers in Jesus who've been members of the Jewish community, who've been active in the Jewish community? Why aren't there more rabbis? Why aren't there more cantors? Why aren't the people who've been involved in the Jewish community, why aren't they believing in Jesus? Because it seemed to be, it's the inadequate, I don't mean to be mean or anything, it's inadequate people, depressed people, lonely people, people that are so easily led here, there and everywhere. Could be led to Hare Krishna, could be led anywhere. They'll just go. They'll just go. There's no resistance. You just follow everything. And these are the people that I notice. I know Jews for Jesus will hate me saying this, but this is what I observed, and I thought, why aren't there? I mean, we have such a lot of strong-minded Jewish people in our community. Why is it's always the vulnerable people that seem to be dominating? And there were so few of us, but they all seemed to be vulnerable in some way, isolated, lonely. That was my observations. Now, I can remember where I was sitting when I heard this. The missionary was sitting next to me, professional missionary, paid missionary, a missionary with many years of experience, a missionary, mature, you know. We're not talking about a 20-year-old, we're talking about somebody in their late 30s, early 40s, mature. This Jewish boy, believer in Jesus, had committed suicide. I think it was on a railway track. When we were told this I was the only Jewish believer there, and the rest were Christians. And the missionary told us that this Jewish boy had committed suicide. And these would be Christians who claimed to love the Jewish people. And there was a silence, as that's very typical. People are sort of shocked. And that was it. There was just silence. And when I thought about that silence over the years, and I thought, there's always initial silence of shock, isn't there, in something? When you hear somebody's committed suicide, there's shock, stunned silence. Nobody said, as you would expect people to say, and they do usually say things like that, oh, how awful. He was so young. He had his whole life ahead of him. How awful. Was he mentally... Why was he not in hospital? Why was he not in hospital? How could this happen? Oh, isn't it all for his family? How dreadful for his family. And people will keep going on. He was so young. He's older. People just, it's the fact that he's so young as well. Nobody said that. This is very unusual, because that is usually a first reaction. What I say from normal people, and I'm using this word normal because what I found in my experience as a Jewish believer in Jesus 42 years is often evangelical Christians don't react to things, in my view, in a normal way. They don't react like non-Christians. They have a very different... It's just so different. So nobody articulated what you would say. Oh, how terrible. A young life. Oh, God. No. Do you know what the missionary said? After this stunned silence, nobody was saying anything. Why is nobody speaking? Nobody's saying anything. And then she said, the missionary, I'll never forget this, what matters is his soul is saved. His soul is saved. And if that sums up Christianity, Messianic Judaism, the activities of Jews for Jesus, everything, those are the words that sum it up. His soul is saved. He committed suicide, but we're not going to be sad about that. We're not going to regret that the life is ended or how terrible. We are focusing that the soul is saved. He is saved for Jesus. I thought about this for so many years. You hear about the suicide bombers of radical Islam, and by their own admission they say the innocent that die will go to be with God. It doesn't actually matter if the innocent die, according to some of these people that are involved in extremist Islam. It doesn't matter that they die, even if they're good people, and even if they believe in God, like the people that, aeroplanes, blowing up aeroplanes. It doesn't actually matter, because they're going to go to heaven anyway. So it doesn't matter if they die, because they're going to be in heaven. So it's all right. We kill the unbelievers on the plane, those who won't convert, so on. But if there's good people on that plane, Muslims who believe in God, one God, or anybody else who believes in one God, it doesn't even matter if you kill a Muslim, fellow Muslim, and it's a child or a teenager or anybody. It doesn't matter, because if they're a good Muslim, they will go to heaven anyway. And it's a very perverted way of looking at things. It's like, well, it doesn't really matter if you die, because you're going to heaven to be with God anyway. And I was relating what's happening now in the last 20 years with the last 15 years with all the extreme radical Islam and their attitude, and I'm relating it to what that missionary said about that boy who committed suicide. No regrets. Nobody said, wasn't it sad that he died so young, how terrible, it's so blah, 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 blah. Nothing. His soul is saved. His soul is saved, and I'm seeing a correlation between the suicide, the bomber, the plane, and not bothering that innocent people die, because they're going to go to be with heaven. If they're good, righteous people, they'll go to be with Allah anyway, so it doesn't matter if they die. And it's very, very perverted. And there is, in my view, there's a similarity to the way evangelicals think. Well, does it matter that he dies young? His soul is saved. His soul is saved. And that's what it's all about. It is about saving souls. It is about saving souls. And in my experience, they will do and say anything if it means saving that soul. The missionaries will do and say things that they know they shouldn't be doing. They know. They will take advantage of people. And because they're so driven. They're so driven. And all that matters is literally saving that soul for Jesus. And I sympathise with that boy that committed suicide, because when I was after 42 years of believing in Jesus, when I decided to just do my faith an overhaul, not because I doubted Jesus, I just thought, I want to understand more why Judaism doesn't accept Jesus. After all my research, I came to the conclusion he wasn't the Messiah. But I was in such I can't begin to tell you the state I was in. Because on the one side, you've got Christianity saying you believe in Jesus. If you don't believe in Jesus, you go to hell. You go to hell. You go to hell. There will be people watching me now that will believe that I'm going to hell because I don't believe in Jesus anymore. You will go to hell. And so, you're seeing with your mind everything. No, he's not the Messiah. But you have this, you're going to go to hell. You're going to go to hell. Thank God. Thank God. I had come to the conclusion pretty early on in my thinking and my research about Jesus being the Messiah. I came to the conclusion I didn't believe in this hell business. And it's interesting because possibly that's what saved me, because I decided this is nonsense, this business about hell, going to hell. If you don't believe in Jesus, you go to hell. That was the first thing that I stopped believing. And I think it was that realizing that you don't go to that I believed you don't go to hell if you don't believe in Jesus, that helped me make that decision. But I'm looking at it from this Jewish boy's position. He was mentally ill. He's mentally ill. He's mentally ill. And missionaries are professional missionaries, paid missionaries, employed by, they are in contact with the mentally ill. People, they know schizophrenics and things. I knew of a missionary, and he was counselling, meeting up with a Jewish man who was chronic schizophrenic. Now, I was a Jewish believer in Jesus, and I suggested, would he like to meet me? It might be helpful if he met another Jewish believer. This missionary, this man said no. He said his mental state is so bad, and he can be quite aggressive and things, that I'm just worried about your safety. Because at that time I lived on my own. And he said, I know you believe in Jesus, but you live on your own. This man is, it's like, he's really not well, mentally ill. Possibly should have been in hospital. But they were sort of releasing so many psychiatric patients, it was a fashion. This is a very strongly paranoid, schizophrenic Jewish man wants to discuss about Jesus with this male missionary. He says, I don't think it would be safe for you to meet up with him, because he I think he was genuinely concerned about my welfare. He said he is very, 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 he's not well. And he wasn't a trained psychiatrist, but he could see it. So again, I'm saying, but he's still continuing trying to talk to him. So you've got a paranoid schizophrenic, aggressive, and very, very ill, and the missionary is still choosing to maintain contact and see and talk with this Jewish man. And so, how do they find these people? How do they find these people? They seem to be adept at finding the most vulnerable people. Mental health issues, little old ladies living on their own, housebound people who need help, who can't get out and about. And I see missionaries as, some of them are preying on people. I see them, many of them, as quite unscrupulous. I don't think of missionaries as people of integrity. There are some with integrity, but I don't trust missionaries. I don't trust them, because they're so driven. I know this from my experience. They are so desperate for that soul to be saved that they will do things that they know they shouldn't be doing. They will take advantage of people. They will lie. They're very, very devious. They're very, very crafty. They're very smart. They are very, very, how can I say, they have to be in charge. They're their own person. They believe they've been called by God. All missionaries, anybody working for Jesus, they all believe they've been called by God, and it's their job to harvest souls, literally harvest souls. The Jews, all people are regarded like crops in a field, harvest the souls. And of course they've got to pick and choose who are they going to harvest in the crop out there. Well, they can't get the chief rabbi, they can't get the rabbis. They know that. They can't get the rabbis. They can't get people who are knowledgeable in Judaism. They can't get the Lubavitch. Thousands of rabbis in the world, and none of them they don't believe it. So who do they prey on? Who is it they're trying to harvest? Well, we'll go over there, it's easy crop. The mentally ill Jew, the isolated Jew, the Jewish person who's totally depressed and friendless. And these are the people we will focus on, because because the Jews, the 10,000 rabbis don't believe us. So who do we prey on next? Who do we try and get next? We'll get these people, because it's all about saving souls. And if that person ends up committing suicide because they're in such distress, because they're in such conflict over this, they're already ill, they're already mentally ill and vulnerable, but they've got this to deal with. My Jewish people, my Jewish upbringing, nobody believes in Jesus. I shouldn't be believing in Jesus. but I do believe in Jesus. I'm told he's the Messiah, but the rabbis say he's not. But they're saying he is. The Christian is coming at them. He is the Messiah. He is the Messiah. He's thinking he's meant to live, but the rabbis say he's not. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? My mum's angry. My dad's angry. They're not speaking to me. They're angry I believe in Jesus. He's mentally ill. He's not well. I can't cope with this. I can't cope with it. I can't cope with it. It's hard enough to cope when you're mentally well, never mind when you're mentally ill. I'm not mentally ill, and I found it hard enough to cope with. Can you imagine what it's like for somebody who's mentally ill? People prone to anxiety, schizophrenics, paranoid schizophrenics, people with personality disorders, people who are isolated, people who don't relate to people very well. These are the easy people to get. We can't get the rabbis to believe us. How many rabbis are there in the world? How many rabbis have there been in existence since the time of Jesus? Hundreds and thousands of rabbis. They all know the scriptures. No, Jesus is not the Messiah. So we've got a mentally ill person over here. We'll befriend them. We'll take them to church. We'll invite them home for dinner. Whether it's a professional missionary or a nice, well-meaning Christian who loves the Jewish people and wants their souls to be saved. They adopt the depressed Jew, the isolated Jew, the pessimistic Jew, living on their own, in a bedsit, nobody around, no family, disconnected from the Jewish community. They befriend them, they take over, they're very good at managing people, they're very much good at controlling. They're coming round every day. This person is alone, they've got nobody in the world, the family have died, Jew on their own. The vulnerable, they go to church, they're singing songs, everybody's smiling, and they just swept along. And this is what I've always hated about Christianity. Even when I was a Jewish believer, during the whole 42 years, I thought, why do you have to prey on people so much and take advantage of vulnerable people? And I used to think, this is before the internet, I used to think, if you want to argue the case for Jesus being the Messiah, then organise a public meeting, get the rabbis, get the vicars, let them debate publicly and let the public come and listen and make their own mind up. But don't go preying on vulnerable people. Don't go preying on vulnerable people. Why is it you're so motivated to help the Jew, but it's all about to get them to believe in Jesus? And that's what I hate. I've seen it. They're preying on a little old lady who doesn't know the time of day. She doesn't know what day it is, what's on a shopping list, nothing. And they're getting involved in her life. And it's all to get her to believe in Jesus. You have to understand that. And I often felt like saying to these Christians, could you not do good without telling her about Jesus? Why are you not motivated to simply do good for the sake of it? But the Christian says, well, we want to do good, but we want to save souls. So they take advantage of more vulnerable people. Jews in foreign countries where there's conflict, there's war, there's anti-Semitism, there's all sorts of things go on. Let's take the Jews to Israel. Very nice. Why don't they give the money to the Jewish agencies that already exist that can bring these people to Israel? But no, the Christian has to get them the souls, the Jewish souls. So they go into these countries with the money they raise from the churches, from Christians, because they all want to save the Jews, they're obsessed with the Jews, go into a foreign country, Jews are being persecuted, all sorts of things. They take them to Israel, they're all smiling and loving, and so the Jew who is vulnerable, why are you doing all this? Well, because we love the Jewish people, and Jesus was Jewish. So this is a surprise, because they've been living in a country where the Jews are being persecuted, despised, treated with contempt, and you've got these people that claim to love them, and they are very touched by it. I mean, you know, they probably, probably if you are being persecuted and you've got somebody who says, well, I'm not going to persecute you, I value you, you would be touched, you know. Oh, that's nice, you know. So they're already, the defences come down. Here is a person being nice to me. Here is a person rescuing me. Here's a person going to so much trouble to take me to the land of Israel. There must be something in this Jesus. If they're going to all this trouble to bring me to Israel and paying and going to so much trouble to rescue me from persecution to take me to Israel, there must be something in this Jesus business. There must be something in this Christianity. And they're saying, no, he's the Messiah, he's the Messiah. So they're vulnerable. And they're thinking, well, maybe he is. Maybe these people seem so nice. They're going to such a lot of trouble for me. And this is how, so you end up Jewish people vulnerable, taking advantage of, and they end up believing in Jesus before they even arrive in the land of Israel. And then they're grabbed, and their faith will be reinforced and reinforced and reinforced and reinforced. They will have no more contact with the Jewish community in Israel. These are people coming from countries all over the place. They're not going to hear the Jewish position regarding the Messiah or anything. They have been taken over by the Christian, the Jew lover, the people who claim to love the Jews, got them believing in Jesus, taken advantage of their situation, and they're now, the soul is saved. They can't even just get a Jewish person, bring them to Israel, leave them. That's what and this is as a Jewish believer, I was thinking this, why can't you just bring them to Israel, leave them? That would be a fantastic mitzvah to just do that. Why are you always you always have a motive. You always have a motive, and the motive for the Christian is always conversion, and I always hated that. I think, why can't you just do good for the sake of it? But they can't. They have to convert the Jew. And they will be going into the Jewish community as volunteers. They'll be going into old people's homes. They're going into the Jewish community. We love the Jewish people. They're visiting the elderly. They could be visiting people with mental illness, all sorts of things. And personally, if I was an organizer in the Jewish community, I would say, if I was recruiting any non-Jewish volunteer, if I hear a single thing about you talking about Jesus, the Messiah, Christianity, anything like that, you're out. I will not have you working for this organization as a volunteer. If you try and talk about Jesus, Christianity, Messianic Judaism, the church loving the Jews, I don't want to hear anything of that. And if I get wind of it, you're sacked. That's what I would say. That's what I would say if I was running any Jewish organisation and I get these Christians coming wanting to volunteer. Because this is what it's about. It's about building up relationships, waiting for a bereavement, waiting for that person to get cancer, waiting for that person to get sacked from the job, waiting for a time of vulnerability, and then they're in there. Jesus the Messiah, he can help you. He can give you peace during this terrible time you're going through. And this is what they're doing, and they will stay in these organisations for years and years and years because they are waiting for that opportunity of befriending, building up trust, and then getting in there when there's a bereavement, getting in there when the person has marriage problems, any problems. The purpose of the missionary is to befriend and to find as much as they can about you. They need to know as much about you as possible, because what they're looking for is vulnerability. They're looking for you. They're looking for illness. They're looking for bereavement. They're looking for you. Are you happily married? They want to find a problem, and they're going to use that problem as a way of getting you to believe in Jesus. They'll start by saying, I'll pray for you. And most people are touched when people say, oh, I'll pray for you. Anybody, even atheists, oh, thank you. People are touched because it's showing human concern, isn't it? And people say, oh, don't believe in that religion, but it's nice to say it, People are touched. And mark my words, everything you tell that missionary or that evangelical Christian you've got friends with, it goes back to the rest of the church. Everything you tell them will be conveyed back to the other Jew lovers in the church. They'll be all discussing and praying about you, and they'll all know about you. It's terrible. Everything. They're not very good at maintaining confidence. They're useless at confidentiality. They have to tell everybody, each other, everything. So, and that's what they do. This is why they ask so many questions. And a lot of people, if you're on your own and you're lonely and somebody's taken an interest in you and you're not well, it's very easy to spill everything out. And I'm sure a lot of people living on their own for years with health problems. I'm housebound most of the time through illness. So I am your typical victim now. I am housebound. I'm age 60. I'm single, right? With chronically sick, housebound most of the time through illness, and so they could easily befriend me, get interested in me. They will offer to do things, but you realise why they're offering to do things, because they want to. It's part of building a relationship, and it's all about building a relationship and getting to know as much information about you as possible. And waiting for a time when you need them. And I'm just thinking myself, 36 minutes and I've been going on, and I wanted to keep this so short as well. But you see, as I'm talking, I'm remembering things. So many incidents. There's so many incidents over 42 years. I've seen so much of vulnerable Jewish people that being... It's always the vulnerable. The people on their own. A Jewish boy, again of 18, had an argument with his parents at home. The Jewish... So he goes and stays in the YMCA. He needs a breathing space because he's had an argument with his dad. Do you know what one of the ladies did at the YMCA? They rang the Christian missionary. We've got a Jewish boy staying. The missionary went to the YMCA, started befriending him, talking about Israel, wanting to know all about him. Why? You had an argument at home. Oh, what was it all about? She's showing interest. She's showing concern. She's wanting to know all about his problems. He's got a lot of problems with his dad, right? His dad wants him to go into business with him. He doesn't want to go into business. He wants to do this. His father says, what's my business? Not good enough for you, blah, blah. So the missionary is sweet and understanding. The missionary doesn't tell this Jewish boy she's a missionary. She befriends him, even though she is employed by a missionary organisation, invites him to her home. It's all about developing friendship. He eventually finds out, I don't know how, that she's a missionary. And of course he's very, very hurt and very angry, but he's very hurt. Now what the missionary did was out of order. The missionary knew it was out of order, but they did it because they're so driven. They couldn't resist the opportunity. They had to get in there. They had to get in there. So they were developing a relationship with this Jewish boy, and it was totally for conversion. But they were building it. They weren't going to tell them they were missionary. They were building it up slowly. The missionary needed to get that Jewish boy to like them, to trust them. Blah, blah, blah. You know, it's terrible. And I've seen it. I've heard it. I'm being used myself. A missionary took me to see a Jewish woman. I understood it was a friend of hers. It wasn't a friend of hers. It was somebody she'd met door to door, a Jewish woman, and she decided to take me as a young Jewish believer in Jesus and present her with me. Present me to her, right? That's what it was all about. And when I realised this on the doorstep, I realised it wasn't a friend. This was just one of her door-to-door contacts. I was so embarrassed. I'd been taken there on false pretences. The missionary had even deceived me. I thought This lady, Jewish lady, was a friend of her, that she was expecting me, that she wanted to meet me, she wanted to talk to me, she was keen to meet a Jewish believer in Jesus. That's why I went along. But the missionary deceived me. And when I realised this, it was awful. I didn't know how to handle it. I was very young. I didn't know how to handle it. I was staying the weekend with this missionary and I just left the next morning. I did not know how to handle it. I know how to handle it now because I'm more mature. But I was so shocked and I was so disgusted. The deceit. Who is deceiving me? But they're doing this because they're so driven to save the soul. They will do anything and they're prepared to say anything. They will use deceit. And in their minds it's justified because they have to save the soul, the Jewish soul. And it's the most important thing because they believe that soul will go to hell if it's not saved. So the deceit in their minds is justified. It's all right to tell a few lies because it's for good. We all know the saying, I'm telling a white lie for good. And we all understand that on different things, don't we? Your friend, doesn't have much confidence. She turns up, you're going out for a night out, a girl's night out. You're going to a discotheque, a nightclub. She's not very confident. She's not very good at dressing either. She's not very good taste and things. She turns up in the most appalling outfit. She's a best friend. You love her and adore her. You're going on a night out. You turned up for the night out. You're in a bar. You're having a drink. She's turned up. What's she wearing? She thinks she looks beautiful. She's so pleased she's bought this dress. She's bought this outfit. Look, I've got this. What do you say? You tell a white lie, don't you? You look lovely. You think I look lovely? She looks awful. But you're not going to say that, are you? You're not going to say that. You tell a white lie. Yes, it's not. Yes, the skirt's lovely. The shoe. You're trying to be diplomatic. You don't want to lie, do you? Because you're not a liar. But what are you going to say? That handbag is a lovely handbag. But really you're thinking, but it doesn't go with the rest of the outfit. But you don't say that. You're trying to be tactful. You're trying to be diplomatic. And in the process you're telling white lies. But you say to yourself, these white lies are justified because I don't want to hurt my friend. Who hasn't told white lies? I've lost count of the white lies I've told in my life. Because you don't want to hurt people. You don't want to distress people. We do it with good intentions. Because we know the truth could devastate a person. It could knock their confidence. Also, people are not ready emotionally to cope with the truth. They're not ready. They're not in that place where they can cope with the truth. So you have to sometimes, as we know, white lie. It's very difficult, Your mother's in hospital. She's very, very sick. Right. Her beloved dog has just died. You're looking after the dog and it's died. When is the right time to tell your sick mother that the dog has died? The doctors, you arrive at the hospital, said, the doctor, I was going to keep telling her, what should I tell you? Don't, she's very ill, your mother. Don't upset her. Don't upset your mother. She's very, very sick. How's the dog? The dog's fine, Mum. Good. As long as the dog's good. I'm fine. You sure the dog's all right? Of course, the dog's all right. Don't worry about the dog. You mustn't worry about the dog, Mum. You're very ill. The doctor says you mustn't worry. You lie. You tell a white lie because you know if you tell her that the dog has died, there is a risk that she could die. She could have a heart attack. She could get in such a state she could die from knowing a dog has died. Now in Judaism, it's permissible to lie, to save a life and to protect life. So you're not committing a sin in Judaism, lying to your mother in that situation, because if you tell her, there's a risk her condition could get worse, there's a risk she could die from that. Her condition get worse, her breathing gets worse, she has a heart attack and that's it. Right? We all get this, we understand this. And so for the Christian says, I will do and say anything that's needed to save that Jewish soul. Because if that soul is not saved, it's going to go to hell. And does it really matter if that person has a heart attack and die? Because they're going to go to heaven, and the most important thing is saving that soul. At the end of the day, if there's conflict with a mentally ill Jewish teenager, the Christian is not going to withdraw and say, we better not get involved in this. This Jewish person is very mentally ill. This is going to make matters worse for their health. We've got to stay away. They're Jewish, stay away. No, they get involved with a mentally ill Jewish person. The mental state gets worse. Everything gets worse. They reach crisis point. They're already in a very seriously ill position and they die. And so the missionary's response and the Christian will console themselves. The soul is saved. So the Christian will say and do anything, justify it. Because the most important thing is that soul is saved. And this is what you have to understand Christianity is about. It's about, at the root of it, doing and saying everything that they tell the Jewish community. We are sensitive to the Jewish community. We know it's wrong to prey on the elderly. We won't prey on children. We won't prey on the elderly. We're not like that. We're not like that. We are responsible Christians. We don't do things like that. Yes, you do things like that, but they don't realise it. They don't view their activities and their attitudes and the way you would see it. You look at it and you say that is deceitful, that is manipulative, that is taking advantage of a vulnerable person. That is not on. And anybody with basic seichel, common sense, can see it. But the evangelical Christian, because they are so driven, including Jewish believers, even though a part of them might know deep down in the kishkis, it's not really right, this I'm doing, I shouldn't. But they'll do it because they're so driven to save the soul, the Jewish soul. And you have to get this. And I hope this has been a wake-up call for anybody in the Jewish community who is running and organising communal activities in the Jewish community, and you've got these Christians coming in. We love the Jews. I hope you take my words on board and are very, very cautious with these people. And you must not be diplomatic. You must tell them straight in a firm, polite, courteous way. We do not want to hear about Jesus, and if you mention Jesus, if you discuss the Messiah, if you talk about your faith, if I hear that you've mentioned anything to anybody here, if I hear of anything, we will dismiss you immediately, because we will not tolerate any evangelism in any shape or form. We do not allow you to talk about your religion or to preach Jesus as the Messiah, the promised Messiah, Yeshua, nothing. And I do hope, please God, that you will take note of my words and seriously implement it in your organisation. Because these people are driven. They are most of them are lovely people. They're kind people. They are sweet people, many of them. But they are driven and compelled to get the Jew converted. And they will possibly not do what you've asked of them, because their belief, they believe that God is with them in what they're doing, so they believe they can disobey your request and still do what you've asked of them. Even though you've asked them, they will still perhaps do it, because they believe they're right and you're wrong. They believe they're doing God's will. You say, please don't talk to the Jewish old ladies here about Jesus. But because they believe they're called by God and this is God's will and all that, they might, if they get the opportunity, not respect your request. This is the problem. They will not respect your request because their belief goes above everything. And you have to remember that the Christian has for centuries and still is professional ministries, Christian ministries also, and evangelical Christians go into countries in disguise. They go to Israel as teachers, plumbers, electricians. This is what they're taking jobs in Israel and in other Muslim countries and so forth. They go in disguise. They say, I'm just a plumber, come to do plumbing in a Muslim country, when in fact they are being supported, paid for by their local church to be a missionary, to convert the Muslim, to convert the Jew, to convert whatever. And so this is the history of Christianity. It is cloaked. They are deceitful and they justify the deceit. So they will go into Israel as teachers. I've met loads of them. They're supported by the churches. They're paid by Christian organisations. They're paid to go into schools, Christian schools. They are there as working to save, to build relationships and to bring Jewish people there in Israel to believe that Jesus is the Messiah. And they have there's no conscience. They don't see it in the way you see it. You have Christian ministers going into countries like Iran. They're going representing the church, but they are actually missionaries. Their job is to build up relationships, build up content, and convert people, Jewish people, to believe in Jesus. You have to get this. And in the same way they do this, they will do exactly the same in your organisations, and they will think nothing of preying on the vulnerable. And yes, they do prey on the vulnerable. They're not stalking rabbis, because they know the rabbis know the scriptures aren't going to believe in Jesus. And so they're trying to grab any Jew, whatever Jew it is. We've got to get and the Jews they pick on are the most vulnerable. And in my experience, when I think of the people I've known, I can think vulnerable comes to mind. Mentally ill, depressed, anxious, isolated. Needing to be loved, needing to be valued, lonely, low opinion of themselves, low confidence, isolated. I'm sorry for going on so long, and I hope that you've got something from this video and that it has been informative and interesting. And thank you for listening, because I know it's a long time to listen.